everybody. My name is Josh. Thank you for clicking on this video. You won't be disappointed. So today we are doing grade 10 scales, maps, and plans, right? And we are talking, as you can see here, and you can probably guess, this is a map, right? So, wherever you kind of reside, you come from, Gauteng, Limpopo, wherever that is, it is represented or seen in this tiny map, right? So, so if we go on, we ask the question, right? How is it possible that, the whole of Gauteng or the whole of KZN, KwaZulu-Natal, is, represented in this small map? Imagine, it's tiny. Look at Africa. Africa is tiny. And yet, I mean, Africa is huge, and yet it is represented in this tiny little block over here. How is that possible, right? I hopefully you can think about that and you know uh, and get the answer, right? So we move on to something that we can all relate to, everyday maps, right? So we talk about um, our Google Maps, right? On your smartphone, you've probably used it before, right? This is our Google Maps, right? Helping us, to get to wherever we need to get to or want to get to. And we also have our paper maps, right? Which is more old school, but nonetheless reliable. I'm sure you've seen this as well. Somewhere maybe in a movie, or maybe your parents have one. So yeah, and now we will go a bit deeper and we'll ask, like, what is a map, right? We're saying map, 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 but what is it? So a map is a picture of a real place, right? So essentially, if we look at, for example, this Google Maps, we see, what appears to be a petrol station, right? You can see the little thing that goes into the car there. Um, Here it is. And that is basically a place, right? We like BP or Shell or wherever you go into there as an actual place. But on the map, it is represented as this little picture, right? The same with the paper map. There's so many. Can you see those tons of lines everywhere? Almost looking like veins. They they represent huge roads and highways, that we've been on. Um, so they're like a small picture of what it actually is, which is huge highways, right? And then, we can get maps of schools. Like, I'm sure, when you started grade 8, probably they gave you a map of the school to help you get from, classroom F to classroom I, that's kind of a school map. I know when I was a student teacher, they also gave me a map, right? To navigate, the big school, right? You can also have maps of towns, right? And smaller areas, well, bigger than a school. And you can also have maps of malls to get you from, let's say, ShopRite to, Checkers or wherever. Then we also, that means that the maps help us find places. So if we did not have a map of the school, right, would we be able to get to classroom F? Or if we did not have a map of the town, would we be able to get to BP garage? No, we wouldn't. A that's why we need a map, right? So it helps us find places. It helps us find the BP garage. It helps us find, a small town, maybe called uh, Newville. It helps us find malls. right? Which is great, right? Imagine if there was no maps, we wouldn't be able to get anywhere, right? That's why maps are so important, right? They help us get to where we want to go to, right? So we move on. Now we are looking at this question, what is a scale, right? It's simple, right? A scale, right, is uh, basically what we talked about earlier, which is basically this huge picture. This picture is in South Africa, by the way. This huge, ginormous picture, you know, uh, being put into this tiny map. That's what a scale is, where you have this huge, gigantic picture being put into this tiny little map, right? Or this tiny little map being put into this huge picture, right? That's what a scale is, right? So this place, let's say Northern Cape, right? This tiny picture, in reality, it's this big, right? Can you see that? So Northern Cape is small and then it moves to big, right? So that's simply what a scale is, right? Um, think about, for example, when you draw a picture of something. Say you draw a picture of a car, right? Or say you draw a picture of, whatever you like to draw, right? Uh, you know, that usually being a bigger thing. But anyway, say you like to draw a picture of a car or you like to draw a picture of a house, right? When you draw that picture, is that picture the same size as a car? Or is that picture the same size as a house? No, so just think of it like that. You're drawing a picture. That picture is obviously smaller than the bigger house. Think of drawing a picture. That is what a scale is, right? So let's move on. So we already know maps are smaller than real life, right? I already discussed that. This map is much smaller, than the real actual place, right? As you can see. Uh, then again, this is called a scale, right? Um, so now let's look at actual, something that actually is important for your tests and exams and things like that, which is if we look at this, it says scale equals map distance. These two dots here are called 2, right? So scale equals map distance to real distance, right? So we already know kind of what maps are, right? This is a map, right? And Google Maps is a map, right? And so we know what maps are, but now we need to focus on what distance means, right? So distance, right, is basically, to put it in simple terms, right? It's to go from here to go from, let's say, here to there. That's what distance is. But if you uh, if we had to kind of explain it more, think about when you wake up, right? You wake up from your bed and you use your legs and you walk all the way to the kitchen, right? Think of that action as distance, right? Waking up from the bed, using your legs and moving all the way to the kitchen. That is what distance means, right? That is what it means. So when you think of distance, think about that. Think about how you move to the kitchen, right? Or you move to the bathroom. So that's what map. Now we know what distance means, right? To real distance, right? So we know what map distance map means, like this or like Google Maps. Now we're talking about map distance, right? So if you are on that map, right, you would be moving using your legs and walking and moving to the other place on that map. That's what map distance is, right? So distance, you know, distance is you're moving, distance is you're moving, you're walking, you're moving on the map, right? Then we look at these two dots here, and then we move on to real distance. right? So real distance, remember we talked about distance, it's moving, it's walking, right? Using your muscles, using your legs, to, now when we look at this word real, right? Real means real, right? It's not that complicated. Real means, while you're sitting or standing and watching this YouTube video, real is that, right? It's what's actually happening. That is what real is. When you go and walk or do anything in real life, that is what real means, right? So now that we've, understood what scale is equal to map distance. Remember, like you're walking on a map, you're moving on that tiny map or on the map, and real distance means you're moving or walking in real life, right? Meaning, you're actually walking or moving distance in real life, right? So if you go and wake up from your bed or wake up from your chair and you walk, that is real distance because you're moving, you're walking in real life, right? What's happening right now. Now, if we go deeper, right, we're looking at 1 to 100, right? Now, this is a ratio, right? 1 to 100 is a ratio. And I know ratio can be annoying, right? And it can be difficult, but ratio is quite simple, actually. Ratio means you are comparing numbers. It means you are comparing numbers. So you have one number, and you compare it to another number, 100, right? It's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. You have an apple here, and you are comparing it to an orange, right? So comparing means you sit back, right? And you look now at the apple and the orange, and you compare them. Maybe you say the apple is red, the orange is orange, right? You're making a comparison, right, between the two, right? So it's actually comparing the physical traits of that apple. Maybe the apple is round, or let's say the apple is small, right? You're comparing, you're saying that, oh, let's use another example, apple and a strawberry, right? So you're sitting back and comparing the apple and the strawberry, right? And you specifically looking at the physical traits of that strawberry. The apple is red. Oh, well, that's a bad, that's a bad example. But the apple is strong, right? You can't easily break that apple. While a strawberry, if you just like do that, like you can hit it with your fist and it will break. So the apple is strong, right? We know that the apple is strong while the strawberry is weak, right? We can all make that comparison. We can all sit back and say the apple is strong and the strawberry is weak. That's a comparison. So when we get back to this 1 to 100 or 100, we are comparing the numbers now. We are saying this is number one, right? You can even put your finger up. This is number one, right? And now we are comparing number one to 100, which is a much bigger number, right? Way bigger, right? So it's like if you have 1 rand and 100 rand. 1 rand is smaller, 100 rand is much bigger. So in essence, we are comparing number one, so small, to 100, much bigger, right? So that is what we are comparing. Um, Now, ratios aren't just about comparing, right? Ratios are something more, right? And something we've learned about already, and hopefully we know about, but it's okay if you don't, right? This is why you are here and you belong here. Um, is basically one. Can you see this one? The small number represents the distance on a map. Map distance, there it is. One represents map distance, or how far you can move on a map, right? You can walk on a map, move on a map. That is one. One equals distance on a map. 100 equals distance in reality, right? That is what 100 means. Distance in reality. right? So how far you can walk or move in reality, right? Distance in reality, right? So yeah, so just to recap, 1 equals distance on a map, 100 equals distance in reality, right? And now that's not always the case, right? So you can see, distance on a map, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they are tricky with us, right? And sometimes this is actually the real distance, and this is distance on a map, right? But for our purposes, we know 1 is the distance on a map and 100 is the distance in reality.